Thank you for joining me today. We're going to look at controlling costs with Cim50 using the bill of materials and works order modules. A little bit of a sort of a deeper dive into those areas. We have got overviews for Cim50 as a whole. So if you want to get a sort of a broader brush view of what Cim50 is capable of, please feel free to have a look at those on our YouTube channel. And we will also be providing further webinars on the individual modules on themselves. My name is Martin Connor. I'm one of the manufacturing specialists here at Cim Software. Feel free to take my details, martin.connor@cim-software.co.uk, and our website, cim50.co.uk, which will take you directly to the Cim50 pages on our website, where you'll find lots of good information, brochures, feature guides, system requirement guides, and the likes. And if you're interested and you're watching this on demand, as they say, please feel free to reach out if this is of interest to you. Okay, so a little bit of an agenda. Just going to introduce you quickly to the Cim50 modules. If this is your first view of Cim50, just show you how the bill of materials and works order modules fit into the Cim50 module portfolio. Talk about sort of the overview and what we're looking to achieve, what the costing within Cim50 is capable of, and the benefits that brings. Then we'll look at a demo of some of those features across those two modules, and then talk about next steps and whether anybody who's running live has any questions. So Cim50 then made up of 7 modules, all fully integrated with Sage 50 Accounts Professional in the UK. And the modules that we're going to focus on today is the bills, materials and works orders. So the two middle modules there at the top of the page. To be able to operate the bill of materials and works orders, you do need the stock control module. Okay, none of the other modules are required, but they just sort of take the manufacturing solution that step further. And as I say, we have got other webinars which covers off some of those modules, such as shop floor data capture, quotations, traceability, and all of that, and the graphical scheduler. We have got a planning one scheduled in the coming weeks, so watch out for that one as well. So what are the features and benefits of the costing functionality within the Cim50 solution? Okay, so you have the ability to cost your bills and materials, the items that you manufacture, whether that be finished items, sub-assemblies, phantoms. Okay, from a materials point of view, components, labor. So what do we need? How much time do we need to allow for an individual, and the cost of that area or that person. Setup time, so we may need to set the machine up prior to carrying out that process, and that'll be amortized across the batch, that cost. Machine costings, so you might use a drilling machine or a milling machine, or pick and place machine or something like that, or a filling machine if you're in the food industry. How much does that cost on a hourly basis? Subcontract, so if you're in a position where you need to send items out for a process, maybe painting, plating, or something like that, we can capture the cost of the subcontract. And finally, overheads, so we can build in overhead percentages for heating, lighting, and the likes against materials, labour, and machine as overhead percentages. All of that gives you great visibility and quite granular visibility if you want it down to those individual elements. So we can cost a bill of material and see what an individual component generally costs us, or an individual process generally costs us, right down to the labour and the machine. We've got various costing methods, a couple of costing methods and settings, so the system can be configured to a certain level to suit your business needs and how you work as a business. So we've got average and last cost pricing. So following what Sage50 provides from a stock valuation point of view. With Cim50, we do introduce a standard cost, material cost within the bill of materials, so that remains static. That won't change based on receiving goods, etc. That just sort of sticks, if you like. You can then report against that. You can also roll up your sub-assembly costs. So if you're manufacturing an item that requires a sub-assembly, so maybe the engine that goes into a car, okay, we can roll up the costs from that engine into the car. And you can decide how that happens. Does it go up to the next levels of material, lock, stock and barrel, or do we break that down into labor, machine, materials, subcontract into their individual elements and roll those up? So that's something to sort of decide upon as part of any implementation and what would work best for you. Once we've realized our expected costs within the bills of materials and on whichever costing method that we've chosen, we can then capture actual costs. Okay, so we have the ability to issue materials, okay, book actual operation times with various methods, process the subcontract processes, and also capture miscellaneous item costs against a works order. So it might be that you need to hire a skip or something like that that you've not allowed for within the bill of materials because you don't really know what that will cost, and you want to apply that to the works order. Quite useful if you're in a sort of a one-off manufacturing environment. Okay, they can all be captured against the works order, and we can do variance reporting against estimated versus actual. Okay, and that's what we've got at the bottom there, is the being able to view those reports, to view and report on that data, okay, to give you greater analysis of what things are actually costing you. And all of that is completely integrated across the Cim50 and Sage50. Okay, so a transaction takes place, we're putting an item into stock as we complete a works order, or for that matter, doing a stock transfer of a bill of material. That will capture actual cost, but on a first in, first out basis. Okay, with works orders, you have the ability, if the components are traceable, to pick whichever batch you require for that works order, and that will take the actual cost of that batch because that's recorded against the receipt or the batch or serial number. Okay, so that's what we're looking to do. It's all about visibility, analysis, and all of that. So yeah, and in these times that we're in, it's becoming more and more important to get a control of your costs. So let's have a look at a demo. I'm going to sort of take you across sort of various elements with the sort of the 20 minutes that we have. Feel free to reach out if you want to take this any further. Okay, so we're now in Cim50. I'm not really going to go into sort of the user interface and things like that. Please feel free to have a look at one of the sort of the core system overviews if you wanted to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive straight into the bills of materials. Okay, and the bill of material that I'm going to focus on is my desk leg assembly, this data set. If you're familiar with this, with the other webinars, is office furniture. So I'm going to be looking at one of these sub-assemblies here, which is a desk assembly. And when we go into there, you'll see the reason why, because it's just sort of quite easy to sort of follow through here. Okay, so on the main details, if I wanted to, I could add some percentage overheads if I wanted to. So against materials, labor and machines, so heating and lighting and things like that, if I wanted to include that, and that will get costed into our bill of material. If I move to components, we can see that to make a leg assembly, we need some tube and some plate. We need 2 meters of tube and 0.05 of a square meter of plate. And if I view the stock record, just to show you where we're getting the costings from, okay, if I go to the financials, we've got the last cost price, which Sage maintains. Okay, so as you receive an item into stock, that value is updated. We've got a standard cost, which is one that is entered by a user and is never changed. Okay, and then average cost price, which again is maintained by Sage. Cim50 will update that as well because we update the Sage transactions. Okay, and that is based on the items that have been booked into stock, which remain are currently in stock. Okay, and average that out. So I like to say if you've got 10 in it, £10, 10 in it, £20, the average cost price would be 15. Okay, and that all comes from the stock history. Okay, so we can see here that the majority have been coming in at £1.25, but we've got 20 there that come in at £2. Therefore, that's increased the average cost price. Okay. So if I move back to my bills and materials, that's where components are getting their costs from, and which is used will depend on the settings within the bills and materials settings. If I move to the operations, we've then got operations to manufacture these legs. So I need to cut the metal, drill the holes, assemble and powder coat, which is a subcontract operation. And if I look at this cut metal, we can see down here that we've got some run time. So we're saying that it takes us 2 minutes to make one. Okay. Then we're saying that it takes us 2 minutes to set the machine up to cut the metal, and that will be amortized across the batch. So that's not against the quantity. If I made 100, it would still allow 2 minutes. If I made 1,000, it'd still allow 2 minutes. And it's £10 an hour. So we've got 33 pence of setup in here for those 2 minutes. Then we've got our labour costing. So based on the run times, we've got a labour costing. So we can set labour rates up in our labour register, again available in the settings. And we've got a time, so that's come through from the runtime. Okay, separate to setup, it come from the runtime. Okay, and we've got there the 2 minutes, £10 for this labour rate. It just happens to be the same as the setup, but this is the £10. Okay, then we've got our machines. Okay, so again, these can be set up in the settings. Okay, predefined with specific rates. And here, this machine costs us £6 an hour. So the 2 minutes is costing us 20p for this operation. Okay, for a single item. Moving along the tabs, we can also put in tooling costs if we wanted to. So it might be that I want to add the cost of some drill bits or something like that in there. Okay, and then finally, if I move across to other, if you didn't want to put in labor times and run times and things like that, you could just put a piecework rate in, a rate per quantity. Okay, and that will get taken into account if you're just looking at it from a costing point of view. If I then move to the costing tab, we can see that we've got our latest costs. So when this was last cost back in 2023, okay, what was the cost? Okay, but if I now cost this bills of material, okay, we can see that we've got a material cost. Okay, we've got a standard cost because we had one set against those two components. We had values set against it. We've got £240 of labour. Okay, so you might be asking why has it arrived at these values? Okay, it's because we've got a costing quantity. Okay, so these values are based on making 400, and that value comes from our costing quantity on the main screen. You can cost bills materials from the main screen with different quantities if you wanted to. Okay, so if you wanted to sort of see if it made a difference, if we made 500 or 100, that sort of thing, then we can do that. We've got our setup cost, machine cost, subcontract. So there's £100 of subcontract. Forgive me, what I should have done is if we go to the operations, we can see that we've got a subcontract process. Okay. And we've got our supplier and we've got a matrix. So for 1 to 500, they're 25 pence per item. 501 to 1,000, 24, and so on and so forth. Okay, and you can have multiple suppliers. Okay, so that's how it's arrived at the subcontract cost of £100, 25 pence times 400, coming out at £100. We didn't have any tooling costs, we didn't have any overheads, and it's come out at a unit cost. So it divided all of the total costs of these out by the 400 to arrive back at a unit cost of £3.80. Okay, and we can see those values down the bottom here. Okay, along with our kg CO2 equivalent for our carbon footprint calculator, which I can, there will be another webinar coming on that as well soon. And I can break those costs down. So it's quite easy for me to see where the system got these costs from. So to make 400 legs, it was 2 meters per leg, so we need 800 meters, £1.25. We arrive at £1,000. We then got our plate. We need 20 square meters at 98 pence a square meter, £19.60. Okay, so that's how it's arrived at the £1,000, £19.60. If we move to the operations, we can see the individual operations broken down into labour, overhead if we had them, labour setup, operation setup, machine costs, machine overhead, tooling, subcontract. So there's no subcontract until we get down to the subcontract, but there's no labour on these because it's a subcontract operation. Okay, and we can get a nice pretty pie chart there to show us the biggest cost element here is the materials. Okay, that stays there forever. You can look back at these costings, so over a number of years, you can, as you cost your bills and materials, which you can do at any time, you can also set the system up to do that automatically for you. Okay, you can print reports if you wanted to. It's all great for the analysis of your costings of the items that you manufacture. And it's also stored in the audit log. Okay, so that's the bill of material. If I move now across to works orders, okay, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to create a works order for my legs. Okay, and I'm going to enter a quantity. So I'm going to make 100. That's just what I've decided to make at this time. Okay, and if I move to the components, it's pulled through the components, so the right number of components. If I look at the routing, it's pulled through the operations. Okay, and it's worth pointing out that this is a snapshot of the bill of material at the time it was created. You can add operations, remove operations, add and remove components, amend any of these. So if this was just going to be a little bit tricky, we could update this if we wanted to. Okay, it's not, it's sort of set in stone. If you give people the ability to amend a works order, they can change that to suit this particular works order. Okay. Subcontract we haven't raised any subcontract at the moment. And then we've got the costings. Okay, so what I can do is that the system will do this automatically for me as I create it. But if I just click on the cost now button, you'll notice that we've pulled through the material costs, the labor costs, setup, machine subcontract for the 100, cost and quantity of 100, because that's what the works order's for. But what you'll notice here is that we've now, this costing is it's £3.81 per item rather than the £3.80. And the reason for that is because we're making a smaller batch. So therefore the setup cost is what's causing that, because we're amortizing that 73 pence across a smaller quantity. So that's you can see how dynamic that is with its costings, and we can break those costs down and see how the system has arrived at that, because it may be that the bill of materials costed 6 months ago and things have changed. Okay, so if I save that works order, we now have our works order in here. Okay, and if I now start to transact against this works order, so I'm not going to worry about allocate, I'm going to go straight to issuing stock. So this is how we realize material costs against the works order, by issuing the stock to work in progress. Again, this serves another purpose of being able to value your work in progress, because we're issuing stock, we've got the value, the costs within the system, and you're recording that. When you issue the stock to the works order, you will get a work in progress valuation. So what we've got here is that it's popped up, and you can see some of the traceability coming into effect here. So if I was to say, for instance, pick, how many do I need? I need 200. So if I take 20 from this batch, because I want to, I'm going to take the remainder from this batch. Okay, confirm that. Likewise, maybe I'll go for, I'm going to go just for the 5 on that batch there. Okay, so I don't have to issue on first in, first out basis. So this will give me actual costs rather than on a first in, first out basis. So now if we dive into that works order, okay, and view that works order and move to the costing tab, you will see that we've now getting at actual costs. Okay, so there's a couple of other columns here. So there's our actual material costs, original estimated, last estimated. So say, for instance, this was a works order that had been sort of going on for a number of weeks or months. If we recosted the works order, we can see what the estimated cost would be now compared to what it was when the works order was originally raised, against what it's actually cost us. So a huge amount of analysis here. So you can see there's our expected. So when we there's where I costed it, which was no different because I was doing it in quick time. And now we're starting to see some actual costs, and we can get an actual cost breakdown. So we can see here that we've issued 180 at £1.25 of the tube and 20 at £2. So that's what's making up part of that £272.50. So that's taking care of materials. Okay. The next, on the other side of the coin, is being able to book labour times. So there's 3 methods of booking actual labour times and machine times. Is operation times, that's just by operation, you're not worried about who did it. Timesheet entry by employee. Okay, so they fill out a timesheet and that's fed into the system. Or using the shop floor data capture using a barcode, so people log on, log off of the operations, okay, and the system would capture the lapse time and feed that back to the works order. Okay, if you want to know more about that, feel free to have a look at our shop floor data capture webinar on YouTube. So I'm just going to do it by timesheet entry. I'm going to pick myself, and I'm going to pick my works order, and I'm going to pick the operation. So I'm going to pick the cutting operation. I did it today. I could put a start time in there. Okay, I'm going to say that I started it at 9:25, finished at 10:25. Okay, or I could enter the hours that I want and do it that way. Okay, it doesn't have to put a time in there, just go straight in and say the number of hours. And then I might want to maybe go to another operation. So if the drilling operation, and I'm going to say that I took 10 hours on that. Okay, and it's going to capture that, and I can drill down into the costs, so I can see what that's costing us again. So the labor rates which are being used. Okay, you can tell the system to use employee rates if you wanted to. Okay, rather than the rates against the operations. But if I'm happy with that, then I can confirm. And if I go into my works order, we can see under the costing tab that we're now starting to realize labor and machine costings. Okay, so we're starting to build up some costs, and our machine costs are a lot higher, our labor costs are a lot higher, so that's resulted in a higher actual cost. And if we want to drill into that, we can see how that's come about. Okay, so complete visibility. What we've also got, as I said, is the ability to print a work in progress valuation, look at labor bookings. So if I go work in progress, so based on this one is just for materials. So based on the materials that we've issued to this works order, the works orders that we've currently got on the system, our work in progress valuation currently sits at £402. Okay, so it's moved out of stock from a component point of view, and it's sitting in work in progress. So that's a value that you can provide to your accountants. If you choose to do so with the works module, you can switch on automatic nominal postings for work in progress. So you can get the system to post these values into the nominal ledger in Sage 50 accounts if you wanted to. Okay, there is that facility for that to happen automatically. So the last thing I'm going to just show you in here against the works order is the subcontract. So I've got a couple of works orders which need processing from a subcontract point of view. So I can raise the works order. Okay, so it's going to use all of the costings that we've set up. So I've entered it once, that's just flowing through, the system will get used. I can amend that if I want to. So if they said it was a little bit more expensive this time, I raise an order, that's now raised a purchase order in Sage. Okay, I'm obviously doing this in QuickTime. If I dispatch the items, I'm going to dispatch the full quantity. I'm not going to worry about a dispatch note at this stage because we're just looking at it from a costing point of view. So they've now been dispatched. And then finally, I'm going to receive those back into work in progress from our subcontract supplier. Not going to worry about the goods received note. And if I now drop back into the works order, we can now see that we've realized the subcontract costs, which were as expected. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to now complete the works order. Actually, before I do that, just to show you that we can add miscellaneous costs if you want to. They're just sort of ad hoc costs that are not stock items. So like I said, it might be a skip hire or something like that. So I'm going to complete my works order. Okay, I'm going to complete the full quantity. Okay, I'm going to confirm that. Yes, I want to complete the full 100. What the system has recognised is that there were some operations, I think at least one, that I hadn't booked any actual time against. So it's asking me, do I want to just use the standard time, which I'm going to say yes. This is a traceable item. I'm just going to click through that just to say that, and I get my label. Okay, and that works order is now complete, and I have now realised all of the costs, which I can break down if I want to. I can see the subcontract. Okay, see all the elements of that. Okay, and if I was to move across to the stock side of things, okay, and go to my legs, and I view this item, we can see under the financials, the last cost price is now increased because that's based on this item going to stock at £4.48 this time. Okay. It's also impacted the average cost price. This item didn't have a standard cost, so it's not impacted that. And if I go to the batches, okay, because we turn this on, this item to have traceability, what we get extra functionality there is that we can drill down and we can see the full cost breakdown of the manufacturing of this item. okay, based on actual and expected. Okay, so we can see sort of the differences there through the system. Probably the reason why I didn't get any actual setup costs is because I didn't enter any against those operations that had set up against them. Okay, so that's why it took the actual time. So that data entry needs to be accurate. You can see there we can got a graphical representation of the costing. So huge amount of visibility uh, around the costings, uh, actuals versus expected. Okay, so you can see how you're doing against those. Okay, so that pretty much concludes the webinar today. So thank you for joining me today. Please feel free to reach out if you want assistance with help with using the Cim50 manufacturing costing features, and drop us an email at info@cim-software.co.uk. And as I said, there's plenty of reading on our website, cim50.co.uk. Thank you very much.